So we had the final debate last night, Trump versus Biden. And I have to say, I'm probably the only person who wishes there was another one. I just feel like the 3 debates for the general election has become a bit of a tradition. And so we're not going to have that tradition anymore, or at least this election cycle we're not going to have it. And I don't like that. I want to see a third debate, even though I'm sure a lot of you guys don't. A lot of you guys probably didn't even want to see a first debate. But I know that both these characters piss people off for understandable reasons, but I would like to see a third debate. But anyway, so what are the big takeaways from this debate, in my opinion? Now, I'm going to get to the snap polls in a little bit, and we'll dive into that. But in my opinion, the big takeaways are, and I watched it twice, watched it once live and soaked it in and live tweeted it, and then I watched it afterwards to get some clips to break down for you lovely people. Biden was more coherent than he was in the last debate. He was sharper than he was in the last debate. Towards the end, he kind of tapered off a little bit because whatever drug he was on was wearing off, but he was pretty sharp in the beginning. And also, he was really, really aggressive. So Biden was aggressive. He was oftentimes on the offense, and Trump started out way too restrained and passive. Now, he loosened up in the second half, but at the beginning, you could tell that his staff had told him, dude, you got to act more presidential. You got to act more presidential. You can't interrupt like crazy. Now, by the way, they changed the mics and they muted the mics when the other person was talking. I didn't like that idea originally. After watching the debate last night and seeing that that function wasn't abused, I actually did kind of like it. I'm kind of flipping my opinion on the muted mic thing because you actually heard them give their answers as opposed to just barking over each other like the two out-of-touch grandpas they are. It seemed like, you know, they're 87 years old and they went for the morning special at Denny's or whatever, and they're about to fight in the parking lot. At least that's what the last debate was like. So Trump was too restrained and passive, trying too hard to be presidential, and it was funny because there were times where the moderator would say something and he would be like, thank you for that question. I appreciate it. And you're watching this like, oh my God, dude, we see what you're doing. Like, we know this is not you. We know how you are when you're being normal Trump. And it was just like, it was too over the top. Now, the other thing is, in my opinion, Trump's attacks were far too niche. Is that how you say it? Niche? 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 I think it's niche. Whatever. You get the point. His attacks were far too in that right-wing bubble. He kept wanting to go back to Hunter. And are there legit aspects to the Hunter story? Of course. I think it's pretty clear that what went on with Hunter and Joe, it's corruption. It is what it is. But the other thing is that's incredibly common in Washington, and it's not like he's uniquely bad. The Clinton Foundation is corrupt, and Trump is massively corrupt as well, with making $73 million from foreign investors and Jared and Ivanka making $135 million in just 1 year, and a lot of that money's coming from foreigners, and then he approves weapons deals and whatnot. So I think they're all corrupt, but he keeps diverting back to Hunter as if that's going to override the economy, COVID, and I don't think it's landing in the same way that a lot of Trump's attacks on Hillary landed. So Trump's attacks were too much in his own right-wing bubble. He's drunk on Fox News and One American News Network. Biden succeeded on the issue of COVID. He hammered him on COVID over and over. And I do think Biden succeeded on the big picture issues. Whenever we got to a big picture issue, and you'll see this later, he actually looked a lot more populist than Trump. And of course, in 2016, if you recall, that wasn't the case. Trump looked more populist than Hillary. So, I mean, that's really bad for Trump. So Trump, in my opinion, needed a big W. He needed to win this debate and win it decisively, and he just didn't. I think the best case scenario you can make for Trump is that it was a tie. I think that's the best case scenario for Trump. Now, the reality is, and again, I'll get to the polls here, people are not saying that. People think Biden won. So the best lines of the debate, and the worst, actually. Let's dive into the worst as well. So Biden's worst lines, I hated everything he said about Russia. He kept going back to Russia. The Democrats really rely on that as a crutch to deflect from any and all issues where they're uncomfortable talking about it. So, you know, a lot of the recent leaks and the emails that we're getting from Giuliani, who's getting it from sketchy sources, but the Democrats just throw a wet blanket over all of it, and Biden would just be like, Russian disinformation. And it's like, there's no indication that any of that stuff is actually untrue. So in other words, the leaks are real. Is it possible it's coming from questionable sources? Yes, but that's irrelevant. If the substance is real, you have to address the substance, and they're not addressing the substance because they can't address the substance. So I hated that he kept going back to Russia. He did it like 3 or 4 times throughout the course of the night, and it's like, the Democrats have got to let this go, but they're never going to let it go. The other thing is, I think Biden did terrible on foreign policy because he was more hawkish than Trump. He sounded more hawkish than Trump, and it was like on purpose that he was doing that. It wasn't just like an accident, a framing issue. He's legit more hawkish than Trump, in particular on the issue of North Korea. And again, I'll get to that later on. Trump's worst parts: COVID. He got hammered over and over on COVID. He just looks like an idiot on COVID. He's not up to the challenge. He loves to go right back to the talking points of like, we have to open up, we got to do, we have to open up. And it's like, that's not, but you're not addressing the actual issue, which is COVID. In order to open up, you have to control the virus. You're not controlling the virus. You're skipping that part and going to, let's open up. But if we have 220,000 Americans who are dead and we're going to have a hell of a lot more, then you have to address that. You can't just skip that and say, all right, but the economic part. Well, the economy is not going to fully recover until the virus is under control, and you have no real plan to get the virus under control. So I think he did terrible on COVID. I think on economic issues, Biden had a few moments where he surprised me, where he like really defended the minimum wage increase, the idea of a minimum wage increase. He really defended working class people because Trump kept bringing up the stock market as an indicator of economic health of the country. And Biden was like, no, the people where I'm from in Scranton, Pennsylvania, they don't own stocks. It's not about that. So I thought that was really good. So, and there were a couple things I could have picked for the best line. For Biden, I'm actually still not sure if this is the number one in my mind, but it's up there. He had this line when Trump kept going back to his typical talking point of like, the blue states, these bad, terrible, evil blue states, and you want me to bail them out? I don't want to bail them out. I don't want to do that. Biden responded by saying, you keep saying blue states. I don't look at our country and see blue states and red states. I see the United States of America. And a president should be president of the entire United States of America. Hey, if I wanted to be a prick, I could point out that the biggest surges recently of COVID are in red states. But I'm not going to do that. And I wouldn't do that because they're Americans. We're all Americans. Now, listen, that's kind of corny and hokey, but it worked. It landed. This is Biden's shtick. Biden's shtick is I'm going to go right back to the, he's a moderate Republican basically. And I'm going to go right back to the, let's come together. Let's be bipartisan. Let's, we're all Americans. And it's cheesy as hell. But yes, when you have a president who just pours fuel on the fire every single day of division and hatred, a lot of normal people are going to look at that and go, yeah, that sounds a lot more presidential, and I like that. So listen, it is what it is. I think that was a very effective line. Biden had some other lines that were good. He brought back malarkey, which made me happy. That was funny. Now, Trump's best line, and Trump will get no credit from this from the media. In fact, the media will cover for Biden. I've seen them do it a million times. But Trump's best line was when they were talking about immigration and they were talking about child separation, Trump said to Biden repeatedly, who built those cages, Joe? Who built those cages? Who built them? And Biden was like, I see what had happened was the sun was in my eyes and I seen the thing over there when Frank and them was at the Safeway and then new phone, who dis? He didn't have an answer because they did build the cages. There was that, story that blew up where under the Trump administration, one of the newspapers covered the story, this immigration story. They had a picture of a kid in a cage and everybody got mad at Trump. And then come to find out, it was taken in 2014 when Biden and Obama were president. Now, that doesn't mean Trump's been good on immigration. He hasn't been, of course. But it is true that they built those cages. So, I think that was Trump's best line by far. Trump picked it up in the second half. He was too restrained in the first half. Biden was really good in the first half. tapered a little bit in the second half, but I think still, even best case scenario for Trump in the second half, it was still a tie with Biden. So now the snap polls. We have YouGov. Biden, 54% say he won. Trump, 35% say he won. That's Biden plus 19. CNN snap poll. Biden, 53%. Trump, 39%. Plus 14 for Biden. Data for Progress. Biden, 52%. Trump, 41%. That's plus 11 for Biden. Now, the funniest thing ever is that Trump is tweeting these like Daily Wire Twitter polls, and it's like 96% or 94% say Trump won, and he's like, see? He's such a goofball. But I will say, yes, these are solid victories for Biden, but at the same time, you go back and look at the official polls on the debates in particular with Hillary. Hillary was winning like 60% in every debate, and she lost the general election. So, take it with a grain of salt. It is what it is. But really, overall, again, Trump needed a big W because he's behind like 8 or 9 points on average. And he didn't get a big W. And I discussed this on Rising the other day, but when you look at the electoral map, even if you take the polls and do the exact same calculations as the 2016 election. So in other words, all the states where there were like a 2 or 3 point swing in Trump's direction on election day, take the map now and do all of that math. So in other words, this is a point for all the people out there who are to one extent or another poll truthers, and they say the polls are fake, they don't matter, and all this stuff. If you do that math and you do the pro-Trump swings, just like 2016, Biden still wins. This is the exact number, 362 electoral votes. So in other words, as of right now, it's a fact. It is way more likely that Biden wins over 400 electoral votes than it is that Trump gets to 270. Again, one of his absolute must-win states is Pennsylvania for Trump. He has to win it to have any prayer, any 6 points down there. So, listen, I told you guys I've been flirting with pounding the gavel for a long time. It's pounded. Not only is Biden going to win, he's going to win over 300 electoral votes. The magic is no longer there for Trump. Now, is it possible he shocks the world and does it again? Of course it is. Anybody who plays poker knows very well that even if Biden has a 90% chance of winning, 1 out of 10 times, you don't win. I've been 95%, 98% going into the river playing Texas Hold'em and been outdrawn. It's happened countless times. So, the actual number, by the way, is 87% likelihood that Biden wins at the moment. But yeah, that means there's still a 13% chance he loses. But, insofar as you can make any political prediction, what's happening right now is a hell of a lot more concrete than 2016, than 2012, than 2008. And I think what happened was now people are overcorrecting. They're overcorrecting. So in other words, Trump pulling it out at the last minute in 2016 has now led people to this default assumption that, well, obviously, that's likely to happen this time. And that really is an overcorrection because he's got to be within striking distance. And right now, he's just not within striking distance. So listen, hide Joe Biden. If you hide Joe Biden from now until Election Day, I really think it's over. So, listen, there you have it. We'll see. We'll all watch it together. We'll all see what happens together. And no matter what, it will not be a dull moment. That's for damn sure.